panel of witnesses. We welcome 5 witnesses to testify about the Equality Act. I'll introduce the majority witnesses, then I'll turn to Ranking Member Grassley to introduce the minority witnesses. Our first witness on the Democratic side is Alphonso David. He served as president of the Human Rights Campaign since 2019. He's the first civil rights lawyer and the first person of color to serve as president of HRC in the organization's nearly 40-year history. Dr. Edith Guffey is our second witness. She has worked for the United Church of Christ for almost 30 years. She currently serves as conference minister of the Kansas-Oklahoma Conference, in which she provides support for 60 churches. She's a board member for PFLAG, the first and largest organization for LGBTQ people, their parents, families, and allies. Last and certainly not least, Ms. Stella Keating is joining us today from Tacoma, Washington. Stella is only 6 years old. I spoke to her yesterday at length. She is completely involved in politics at every level. She has collaborated with her local city council, mayor, and state legislature from a surprisingly young age. Senator Grassley?
Thank you. I have the privilege of introducing Abigail Schreier, who is an independent journalist. Her work has appeared frequently in the Wall Street Journal. She also authored a 2020 book discussing transgender youth titled Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, end of quote. She is a Yale-educated lawyer who resides with her young family in Los Angeles. Mary Rice Hassan is a fellow at Washington, D.C.'s Ethics and Public Policy Center. Her research focuses on politically effective women, families, and religious freedom. She's a widely published author and the mother of 7.
Thanks, Senator Grassley. My staff has told me that I said that Stella was 6 years old. She's 16, a big difference, and I'm sorry for the mistake. Let me lay out the mechanics for the rest of the hearing. After we swear in the witnesses, each witness will have 5 minutes to provide their opening statements. There'll be one round of questions, each senator with 5 minutes to ask, and please try to remain as best you can within your allotted time. Could all witnesses please stand to be sworn in if you are able? Raise your right hand. Do you affirm the testimony you're about to give before the committee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have all answered in the affirmative. Mr. David, would you please proceed with your opening statement?
Hold on one second, Chairman Durbin. I'll be with you in a minute. Thank you so much, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today. My name is Alphonso David, and I am the president of the Human Rights Campaign, the nation's largest civil rights organization working to achieve equality for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer people. I'm very proud to be here today. It's an honor and a privilege to deliver this testimony on behalf of more than 3 million members and supporters of the Human Rights Campaign nationwide, and our movement partners and leaders that are fighting for equality. I appear before you today not only as a legal expert, but also as a Black gay man, a public servant, and a person of faith. When I returned to the United States as a refugee with my family, I saw firsthand how the freedom this nation promised was won with costly contingencies. As a Black teenager in Baltimore, I quickly came to understand that my life was considered less important because of the color of my skin. As a gay man, I came to understand that living my truth would cost me greatly, from acceptance in my own family to opportunities for pursuing my dreams. Too many people in the LGBTQ community live with the real costs of inequality, from denial of basic services to fighting for shared survival. Despite the progress we have made, discrimination, unfortunately, is alive and well in this country, and we need to address it. Despite all of the work that we've done, We know particularly LGBTQ people of color and people who hold multiple marginalized identities face discrimination. More than 1 out of 3 LGBTQ Americans faced discrimination in 2020, including 3 out of 5 transgender Americans. Discrimination against our community is not only pervasive, but has this devastating consequences. There is an epidemic of violence against the transgender community, particularly Black transgender women, pushed to the margins by racism and transphobia and sexism and homophobia. Black trans women in this nation live daily with the threat of violence, a threat that is heightened by attacks at every level of government. LGBTQ people, especially people of color, are more likely to live in poverty, to experience negative health outcomes, and to lack access to opportunities. This must change, and you have the power to deliver the change that our communities need by making the Equality Act the law of the land. The Equality Act would codify the Supreme Court's decision in Bostock versus Clayton County and guarantee non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people in many areas of life, including housing, education, credit, and jury service. It also adds sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity to public accommodations and federally funded programs. Less noted, but just as critical, are the important protections for race and religion. For example, Title II of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 contains a narrow definition of public accommodations that in the 1960s addressed the most visible areas of race discrimination, such as hotels and lunch counters and pools. This narrow scope, however, was and continues to be insufficient to tackle race discrimination. People of color continue to face persistent discrimination on a daily basis in a range of settings, including stores, salons, car services, and taxis. In fact, a recent study found that 53% of Black shoppers in the United States experience unfair treatment related to race. Accordingly, the Equality Act amends the law to include a range of providers of goods and services similar to the Americans with Disability Act and state laws around this nation. Notably, retail establishments, transportation services, food banks, medical providers would be considered public entities, given that any member of the public could reasonably expect to go and receive goods and services from those places. Updating the law will ensure that no one is denied the opportunity to fully participate in society just because of who they are. This update to civil rights law is also necessary because of the inconsistencies that exist between states and at local levels. By enacting inclusive non-discrimination laws and policies, many states have bettered the lives of LGBTQ people and millions of people around this country. Last year, for example, the Virginia Values Act made Virginia the first Southern state to enact comprehensive non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people and added statewide protections for all protected characteristics, including race, sex, and religion. Despite significant steps forward, the patchwork of laws leaves millions of people, including me, subject to uncertainty and potential discrimination that impacts our day-to-day lives. And in addition to its necessity, it's important to note that the Equality Act is supported by the overwhelming majority of the public. Well over 2/3 of Americans support these protections, including 94% of Democrats, 85% of independents, and 68% of Republicans. These protections are supported by a majority of adults in all 50 states and by solid majorities across all age groups. Our nation's top employers have also endorsed the Equality Act, with nearly 400 major companies operating in all 50 states. People of faith across the political spectrum also support the Equality Act because they believe in the dignity and the worth of every person. And finally, more than 630 organizations representing civil rights, women's rights, healthcare, education, labor, child welfare have endorsed the Equality Act. As the late, great civil rights giant, Representative John Lewis said 2 years ago when the Equality Act was introduced, it is a must that we do what is fair, what is right, and what is just. We need the Equality Act to set all of our people free. LGBTQ people live in every part of this country, in every small town and major city, every community, every native territory. We are veterans, nurses, teachers, parents, artists. We are your colleagues. And all we are asking for is for the same protections under law that should be guaranteed to every single person in this nation. Thank you.